Hey Pixelers, I wanted to make a quick video about namespaces. Now this may seem like a very easy topic to talk about, but I think there's something very important we need to discuss. So here's an example. So recently I was brought in very temporarily into a project, and I was asked to give a nice audit for their audit report that they had to produce, which would show the permission matrix of everyone who had access to Kubernetes. Now this place was quite important for the developers to have access to Kubernetes, so they could manage their own applications in the system. The problem is it was a complete nightmare. It was like you could imagine a cat just like took over a ball of yarn and completely shredded it all over the place. And the problem is this mindset of let's have a different namespace per application, right? Now you may think that's ridiculous. Why would you have a different namespace per application? But obviously this is the methodology which Helm encourages you to use. Now there's no problem with Helm. I love Helm. But the problem is, you know, you want to pull down a third-party Helm chart. Someone's already made it. They're going to have a default namespace already inside of that Helm chart. And, you know, why not? You need to have something there. And I don't want to encourage everyone to start using the default namespace. But seriously, we should start thinking of our cluster differently. It was such a mess producing these reports for the auditors, being able to specify who had access to what, because it was just a complete mess of everyone having access all over the place. You couldn't just guess who had access to what based on their role in the company, which, in my opinion, is a lot safer of a way to do it. Not the guessing part, but the feeling confident that you know exactly who has access to what based on where they are in the organization. It's a lot easier to work and manage. So, my proposition is you should think of your namespaces for Kubernetes like tenants. So what is a tenant? Very briefly, a tenant is a group of users who share the same permission structure. So you can imagine it like a team of developers. Usually you don't want to have that much different of permissions inside of a team. Usually they want to work together. So usually a team will have the same level of permissions. That is a tenant. The benefits are it makes it a lot easier to manage RBAC. You can understand, hey, this is a team. This is a group of people. They're the same tenant. They're probably going to have the same permissions. It allows you to manage your resources better. It allows you to say, hey, this team, they have these same limitations when it comes to resource limits and quotas. So it makes it very easy to know who has how much processing power. It makes it extremely easy to define your networking rules. You know, you can say, hey, this tenant can't access this tenant's pods. Very easy. And obviously you can say, you know, there's certain exceptions. So maybe under certain exceptions, the networking rules are allowed. It makes it a lot easier to manage your CRD configurations. For example, with external secrets, you can specify which namespaces can access which cluster secret stores, which also means it makes it very easy to make policy rules per tenant. So you could imagine you could say, hey, this tenant can only access Docker images from this repository or these set of repositories, or different, just all sorts of different policies you could come up with Kyverno, CEL, or obviously OPA, and restrict it to that particular tenant. And you will be obviously able at that point to be able to tell the auditors with complete confidence who can access what. Makes it very easy. Now I understand this could sound like a mess if you're an organization with lots of tenants. You can think, oh, hold on, how's this going to work? Maybe you have a Spark cluster and different tenants can spin up different Spark nodes, and maybe you want that all in a, for example, Spark namespace. So in response to that, I have two answers. The first one being, in some situations, maybe it's not a bad idea having different management planes for each tenant. That makes it a lot easier to lock down certain tooling on a per tenant basis. You can imagine, right? You know, if you want to make it so a certain tenant can only consume a certain amount of Spark resources and another tenant can only consume another Spark resources, maybe separate them out. It will make it a lot easier to manage and make sure you know who's using how much. Now, I understand this can also seem frustrating because then you're adding an extra overhead into your cluster and then you have extra Spark clusters to manage. I get that. So you could also think of it, hey, Spark, that's another tenant. So let's brainstorm for a second what tenants you could have. And let's take it back to a smaller organization, because I think this advice really is powerful for the smaller companies. The types of companies which are using Kubernetes, and they want to use Kubernetes, but the problem is they don't need all of these sprawling namespaces to manage all of these different complexities. And the way that I often see it is I think you can get away with, for the most part, maybe 4 namespaces. The first one being kube-system, you want to keep that one. The next one being infra. Infra is the tenant infra, you could imagine, is the administrator of the cluster. And you might want to install your operators into this namespace. You might want to install your various management resources, maybe your monitoring tooling, who knows, into this namespace. Then you can have your domain namespace. This can be where your developers deploy their applications to. And then you could imagine having a CI/CD namespace. You could also imagine having additional namespaces, like, for example, testing namespaces, or whatever different tenant you could come up with. For example, CI/CD could be considered a different tenant to domain, because when you think about it, CI/CD is its own type of person. Even though it's an automated person, it's its own type of person. You don't want to have this cross-concern necessarily between domain and CI/CD. That can be confusing, especially when domain could be considered locked down and secure. You don't have necessary communication between those two namespaces. Very easy to lock down when everything is nicely segregated. Additionally, I love the idea of having that strict segregation between infra and domain for two reasons. Makes it very easy to secure things. For example, you can say things in the domain namespace have special rights to certain other resources, like, for example, AWS or other tooling, or in the example I gave before, you could imagine having different cluster secret stores for these namespaces. So maybe the infra namespace could pull down the infra-related secrets, and the domain namespace can't. So, for example, maybe that Postgres administrator user can't be pulled down, his password can't be pulled down into the domain namespace. Additionally, I think it makes it a lot easier to developers to maintain their stuff in production. If everything is nicely in one namespace, which has all of the developer stuff, and only the developer stuff, you could imagine it's very easy for them just to say, hey, I can see my pod. I'm not seeing all this other random stuff that confuses me. I can see my pod. I can now maintain and configure it and manage it in production. It gives them a lot more confidence when there's not random stuff that they don't understand. So, and obviously with RBAC, you can make it so they physically can't see the other stuff. They can only see their stuff. So there's nothing else in the system for them to be concerned or confused about. And I really like having that layer of abstraction from developers, because I really just like the idea of them managing their stuff. I hate it when they come to me and they say, hey, my stuff's not working. A lot of the time I want to say, well, I give you all the tools so you can do it yourself. You shouldn't have to come to me. I should only be here when things go really bad. And ultimately, that should be my job. I should be the guy when things go really bad. And I encourage you to have the same mindset when you're managing infrastructure systems. Anyway, I hope this was a quick, interesting video, and I'm not recommending you change all your namespaces in your organization. That could be a hell, but I find this very simplistic approach to be a lot easier to manage, especially for the smaller organizations where ultimately you don't actually have that much going on to begin with. Anyway, hope you guys have a lovely day. Cheers.